Holy shit. The trailer was trippy, but still I was not prepared for Edgar Wright's 2021 mind-bending horror Last Night in Soho. The gradual descent of Sandy's dream and Ellie's mental health told a heartbreaking story between them, with the whisperings of a suicide as clues. It's rare for a horror film to end with a happy protagonist, but in this case we needed to know that Ellie avoided her mother's exact same fate. Subtle, but it's there. The timestamps for each sequence can be found in the comment section for your viewing pleasure. Now, let's begin. We start as always with a focus on our protagonist, specifically their personality, their inner conflict, and their situation. Ellie's obsession with vintage fashion and glamorized lifestyles, memories and ghosts that play through the mirrors, and the weight of at least 3 generations of dressmakers. Next, we examine where, why, and how our protagonist exists in their world, with a focus on why they don't quite fit in. Quiet, simple Ellie travels into the boisterous, complex web of London, where her innocence is a beacon for predatory behavior, and she refuses help with her overwhelming baggage, literally and soon metaphorically. Then a brief event happens, one that's never happened before. It's destined to lead all the characters away from their status quo. Jocasta makes her presence known, and her shadow darkens the narrative, which leads us to examine the effect of that something new to the status quo, specifically what's different now and what remains the same. Jocasta is a poor replacement to Gran's wisdom and advice, who proves herself as competition rather than friend, and Ellie follows along with this new crowd, trying to fit in. We move along to the discovery that things are less than ideal, or else we explore how badly things are. Both scenarios are common. Ellie's inexperience with sex and dating is on full display. Then a ghostly presence hints that her gift is in full effect in London, as Jocasta reveals her two-faced persona, and we receive a hint that suicide is predictable for someone like Ellie. Then she proceeds to make dorm life a living hell. Next, our characters dedicate their effort to a specified goal, and this is always narrower in scope than what the third act will demand. Ellie scrambles to keep up with her responsibilities, and hunts for an affordable room away from the dorms, which is how she deviates from the path of her mother, then promises Miss Collins to stay put like a good girl. Then we run through a brief checklist of the main story elements that we can expect during this journey. Ellie's new room and moody ambience, her zeal for 60s fashion and culture, vague yet breathtaking supernatural shenanigans, and of course, the tragedy of Sandy. Which brings us to the brief event that launches our characters into the wild jungle of the second act. It's also called the oh shit moment. Sandy woos Jack, propelling herself in a forward direction. Oh shit. We follow our characters as they discover the new rules and expectations of their journey. These are always distinct to the narrative at play. Sandy proves her star quality talent as the immersion with Ellie deepens. Jack hams up his comic book roguish persona, and Sandy takes big steps forward in a direction. Next, our characters showcase their ability to grow and progress, and this is typically an external or physical beat rather than internal or emotional. Ellie brings the ghostly fashion to life in class, while an impossible hickey crosses into real life too. Positive progress for the antagonistic force. Then she follows along with Sandy and Jack's next date. Then our characters face legitimate and understandable reasons to deviate from their stated convictions, agendas, or desires. Sandy propels entirely too quickly in her career, while Ellie clouds the difference between her and Sandy, and even finds herself walking in the same naive footsteps. We endure the anxiety as our characters face an escalation of problems and complications. Ellie needs a job and adds more responsibilities to her plate. A stranger appears to recognize Ellie, hinting that her mother had followed a similar trajectory as Sandy. Then Sandy endures the humiliation of being backup eye candy while supposed enemies reveal themselves as friends. Next, our characters evolve internally or emotionally, and they do this by using elements of the plot or story which they've gathered and learned so far. Sandy deals with heartbreak to see Jack's true intentions. Ellie's mounting sense of protection interjects into the memory. Sandy gives up her morality for the hope of career progress, and the memory begins to feed back on Ellie. Then our journey-weary characters come to terms with their ongoing struggles. Moments and elements of the first act are used to gauge their progress. Ellie's Act 1 confidence begins to crack. Act 1 nice guy John offers his support and friendship again, while Gran detects the downward spiral that she predicted in the opening. Then the Act 1 stranger floats ever closer to Ellie, which results in a brief event that strikes at our protagonist's core conflict. Good and bad memories soak into the walls, finally giving us a clue about why this is all happening to ghost-sensitive Ellie, and why she can't escape it. And there's no turning back from here. We receive needed answers alongside our characters, which relate to both their external journeys and their internal conflicts. Sandy's reality settles in, and she tumbles further away from her dream, while Ellie struggles to break through the memory. Next, our characters complete their narrow scope objective, yet discover that their victory is shallow or altogether meaningless, and must complete a wider scope objective. Ellie watches the second half of Sandy's tragedy, but it doesn't set up a happy ending. She accepts relaxation and downtime, but it's only as her soul escape. Then our characters face an existential conflict that wounds their sense of self and identity or their physical journey. Jocasta drugs Ellie, pretty much just to see what happens. Another hint to the influence her mother would have been exposed to. The haunting surrounds Ellie and increases with intensity, so she plans to stay awake all night long to avoid another episode. We celebrate with our protagonist in light of an undeniable win, which is always related to the rebirth in some way. Ellie witnesses a conclusion to Sandy's tragedy, though not from within the memory. Miss Collins proves feisty and protective, and she gives Ellie another chance despite the rule breaking. Next, our characters suffer a grand loss, and this is always connected to their newfound inability to quit their journey. Even without drugs, the haunting grows with intensity. Then it sabotages her in class, and even follows her around London. Yet the police aren't receptive to such a vaguely crazy story. Then we experience a thematic freefall, as the main story elements are ramped up and thrown into upheaval. A lack of information plagues Ellie, in Sandy's mystery and her mother's, while John proves yet again his unwavering support. The memory grows strong enough to touch her in the real world, and it pulls her deeper into vague supernatural shenanigans, which forces us into a brief event that robs our protagonist of seemingly any hope of success. Pushed beyond reason, Ellie almost kills Jocasta by mistake, and the full scope of her danger to others is made obvious. We watch our characters realize that they cannot return to their first act selves, and they turn to face the wider scope objective. Fully engulfed in the memory, Ellie chases Sandy, desperate for answers. Then she chases the memory of Jack, desperate for justice and peace, and she's placed face to face with a living connection to Sandy's tragedy. Next, our characters use the major swings of the story and their personal journeys to move towards the climax. Ellie digs for a confession, for a conclusion to the mystery. Then Chekhov's car wreck finally pays off, after heavy foreshadowing. The blur of men in Sandy's life leads Ellie to the wrong Jack, and John proves again to be her unwavering rock. Then the final confrontation plays out between our protagonist and characters against the antagonistic force. Miss Collins reveals the real conclusion to Sandy's tragedy, then proceeds to clean up this bothersome loose end. But John provides enough distraction for Ellie to escape up to the room, who then refuses to avenge the victims of the woman they helped victimize, which culminates in a brief moment where our protagonist finally, and oftentimes metaphorically, overcomes their place in the Act 1 status quo. Ellie prevents Miss Collins from killing herself, a feat she was unable to do for her mother, who might have shared in at least some of Sandy's early tragedy. We experience the direct aftermath of the climax. This can give our characters a moment to reflect on the situation, or else wind down the action with a coda. Miss Collins refuses to be judged by her actions and not by her perspective, and surrenders to the room she haunted. Then Ellie and John are pulled from the fire, both alive. Next, we touch base with additional characters, typically to contrast them against the new status quo. The prodigious dressmaker achieves a multi-generational dream, while Gran and John celebrate her runway success. Then we conclude with a tight focus on our protagonist, specifically to contrast them against how we met them at the opening. Ellie earns the public respect of her two-faced peers, while her mother's ghost has found her in London, and Sandy proves that she'll also be there too. And there we have it. Edgar Wright's 2021 mind-blowing horror Last Night in Soho adheres perfectly to the 29-point story structure every step of the way. And it's proof that you don't need to explain away every supernatural element to make a well-rounded horror flick. Now let's move on from Thomasin McKenzie dealing with a pack of catty bitches to Lindsay Lohan dealing with a pack of catty bitches. Join me next time for Mark Waters' 2004 cult favorite comedy, Mean Girls. As always, thank you so much for your time. Please like and subscribe if you enjoy this content, and consider commenting on and sharing this video to help the channel find its audience. Take care of yourselves out there, and I'll talk at you next time.